For your latest information, get expert opinion on an issue affecting us as Malaysians and citizens of the world. When we go face to face with our guests on Thursdays at 11:15 a.m. Only on TRAXXfm.
TRAXXfm's morning. Good morning, Malaysia. It's 11:15 on the clock exactly, and this is, of course, face to face. And yes, she is on radio right now. Good morning, Philomena and Gnanapragasam. How are you?
Good morning, Otto. Fantastic. I'm right here in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, yes, in the middle of the Asia Media Summit.
Oh, my God.
So I'm great.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us, because I know you are a very busy person. Personally, you are also a journalism as well. I know you for many, many years already. We've been working together, and now you are the director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development. And we are also currently live on our Facebook Live right now at TRAXXfm Official. If you'd like to say hello or hi, you can do so. Leave a comment, share as well. So if you have anybody who is interested in becoming a journalist, this is the time for you to ask. This is the time for you to actually tune in and share this information, all right? So, Philo, how are you again? I know that you're busy currently, so I'll just jump straight into it, right? So what is the role of journalists and its purpose, actually?
Good question, Otto. Thank you so much. And basically, when you look at journalists, we are the people who uphold the truth. We are the people who work towards press freedom. And we are the people who work on giving the most accurate information, sourcing for information, and bringing the news to the people. So if you look at journalists, basically that's our role. And on a greater level, it's upkeeping media's role as the fourth estate of democracy. So that's what all of us as journalists aim to do. We uphold this notion that media is the fourth estate, and it will be, and we fight for the freedom and free flow of information, relevant, accurate information to the masses. So basically, that's the role of, journalists.
I mean, we can actually see a lot of changes now than back in the day. So what is your opinion of journalists back then and now? Is there any difference in terms of culture, probably when it comes to attitude? Is there any difference?
Plenty of differences, actually. So if I look at it from a professional point of view, we had many, many great journalists over a long period of time who were actually investigative journalists. So when you talk about investigative journalists, it's like journalists who go in search of a story. You've probably heard of many Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists who covered very extensive news and who were willing to risk their lives to do that. And the journalists who looked at the job as from a very scientific approach, meaning that if I'm going to do a particular story, I need to do the research, and it's not just hearsay. And just bear in mind that those days we did not have social media, we did not have internet, so that involves a lot of searching, a lot of reading, a lot of knowledge that we gained through meeting people, through actually sourcing for information. So it was a whole new and different ballgame altogether for journalists of today as compared to the yesteryears. Today you have social media, you have internet, and any information can just be gotten from Wikipedia without even talking to a source. So that's basically, we're looking at technological differences, which also affect attitudes. So sometimes the journalists of the previous years used to be asking questions. They were bold enough to ask questions. But over the years, some journalists, refrain from asking questions. So I think this is something, there's an adage in journalism. It's like, there's never a stupid question. That's what someone told me a long time ago. Philo, go ahead, ask a question, because there's never a stupid question. So I sort of follow that, and sometimes a question that you think is stupid opens up a whole new world of information. Yes. So that's it, Otto. So I think the change in technology, the change in availability of information, but today information, there's an over-excess of information, actually, so to speak.
I totally agree. Because of technology, things have changed dramatically and even rapidly. Information can be easily, just at a click of a button. It's quite simple. But back in the day, it was much more difficult. You have to read through newspapers, and you have to ask more questions. You have to meet the person themselves, and then try to create some repo. But now it's just as simple as that, just a click of a button. Now, with the entire internet, right, to be easily accessible, how do you actually we filter the information that is going out into the public? How do you actually filter and ethically through journalism?
So this is a big issue, right? Because anyone and everyone can feed any kind of information on social media. So probably you get a news that someone puts something on and makes it viral. So what's the role of a journalist? So basically a journalist has to fact check. Now that has never changed. And now even more so, because you have such a thing as fake news, disinformation, misinformation, all these things come into the picture. And there are people who are opinion leaders, there are people who are architects of disinformation. Now, who are they? Architects of disinformation are people who are out there deliberately to create or do a smear campaign or to create a false story that automatically gets viral and people begin to believe. And the architects of disinformation, are out there with an agenda. Their motive is to create such stories, put it on social media, and if a journalist is not careful, you can become a victim, meaning that you tend to take that story, you believe that story, and then you disseminate it. Now that's going to cause a whole lot of chaos. So in this era of disinformation and social media, we have to be very careful as journalists, because you don't fact check once, but you have to look at least at 3 reliable sources. So if it's a crime story, you're going to go to the police, you're going to check with your other colleagues in the news organizations. You probably have a gatekeeper in your own office who would check this. So again, I would say that checking, fact-checking, gatekeeping, these are the crucial areas for journalists of today.
Which is why you have to study this. You have to it's a skill as well. Most people nowadays, it's more about netizens, and they consider it journalists as well, which is very confusing for the people like Gen Alpha would easily take information. But when it comes to journalism, it takes skill. It also, you can actually study it in the university. You get a certificate to get to where you are right now. Just like yourself, Philo, you've been a journalist for many years. You've been through a lot as well. You've been through many different hierarchies as well to reach where you are right now. So what is the difference between a journalist and netizen?
Well, a journalist is one person who's been trained, like you just put it into words, someone who discerns information, someone who checks, and they have a social responsibility. Like I said, one of the biggest responsibilities that journalists are looking at today is upkeeping media as the fourth estate of democracy. This is part of our role. But when we look at netizens, I'm not saying all netizens are bad. There are people who are out there with a real cause. But mostly, many people in today's age tend to look at sensationalizing information, or even looking at promoting themselves. Today it's all about how can I make myself get, numerous or hundreds of likes on Facebook or on any other social media. How do I become popular? So when such things come into play, then you would compromise on things like accurate information or the truth and false news or something like that. So ethical journalism is what is the key right now. Whether you're broadcasting it from a radio station, from the newspapers, or from the internet, are you ethical? So I think ethics and journalism is a huge thing that we should really study. But one thing you mentioned about Generation Alpha, Otto, I think the other thing is for people, and young people especially, to be more media literate. Right? So if you look at countries like Korea, they are very much into media literacy. So from a very young age, media literacy is inculcated in schools. And what happens is young people are taught on how to discern the news that they get from social media or anywhere. So how do they consume this information? Do they check? So from a very young age, they're taught how to analyze and think. So you need thinking young people. So once you have thinking young people, these thinking young people, and young people are very clever nowadays, so they're very clever. They are very, very information savvy. They're also, they like all the latest news. Contrary to what we thought about young people many years ago, Otto, I remember the people who came and told us in radio, young people just want to listen to music. But today, that has changed. Young people want information. They want to be at the top of things. So media literacy is the way forward. So I would say that it's time for our youngsters to be more educated to be creating an awareness on why media literacy is important. So that's part of what we are doing as well. Yeah.
So true.
Yes.
For those who are actually tuning in right now, we are also actually live on Facebook Live at TRAXXfm Official, TRAXXfm OFFICIAL. I'd just like to say hello to those who are online. Liman Hui says good morning. Good morning to you. Veronica Domingo says good morning. Otto. Patricia Lim Lee Tiang says good morning, TRAXXfm DJ and presenter and all Traxsters. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do please share this Facebook Live. For some reason that somebody else or your friend might be interested in journalism, this is the way to go at this particular moment. All right. So we're talking to Philomena Gnanapragasam. She's the director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, talking about ethical journalism. So we're going to take a short break right now, and we'll be back with our guest. So stay tuned. For now, it's back to more music with Macy Gray, I think. Yeah, right here on TRAXXfm. Stay tuned.
For your latest information, get expert opinion on an issue affecting us as Malaysians and citizens of the world when we go face-to-face with our guests on Thursdays at 11:15 a.m. Only on TRAXXfm.
Be inspired, informed, and up to date. Tune in to Trax Momentum interview feature of the day at 11:15 a.m. Join us as we speak to our panel of guests on various topics. Health on Trax on Monday. Tuesday, Spectrum. Wednesday, What Matters? Face-to-face with our guests on Thursdays. And on Friday, tune in to W Talk. Trax Momentum, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Only on TRAXXfm.
Good morning, Malaysia. Otto coming to you live from Angkasa Puri, Kuala Lumpur. It's 30 minutes past 11. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. And today we have our special guest. She is Philomena Gnanapragasam. She's the director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, and we're talking about ethical journalism. Once again, thank you so much, Philomena, for being with us today.
Thank you, Otto.
All right.
Yes, great to be here. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next set of questions, all right? So it is common now to see that people doing reporting, and anyone can be a reporter nowadays. So can you tell us, in your opinion, what is the difference? How is this? How does this happen, actually?
Okay, good question, Otto. Actually, anyone can be a journalist. Now, that is a very empowering statement, which means that people want to share information. People want to, they're interested to tell what they know or what they've seen. There's a good point in that. If you look some years ago when we had the tsunami, for instance, or the earthquake in Nepal, you notice that there was a rise in citizen journalism, meaning that, journalists themselves were probably caught or they were somewhere else, but visuals, were being sent in from netizens, from citizens themselves. They were sending pictures of what was happening, and I think that's good because people take on a proactive mode, especially during this kind of disasters. And it really, really helped the news people then with all these kind of footages and interviews or latest information that was being fed from a different source, rather than waiting for the wires to give you all the news. So in one sense, it's good. But in the other sense, people also begin to use this power of giving information in the wrong way, whereby they are using it for their own personal agenda. Now, that can be dangerous because when you start supplying false news, especially when we went through a pandemic of Otto. I remember that that's one country, I won't mention the name. There was a citizen who was standing outside the hospital and giving a report saying that so many people have died and the government has not done anything. And then, COVID is horrible in this country. And that caused a huge panic in the particular state. Not in Malaysia, it's elsewhere, but this happened, and it's a real story. So this is what happens when we begin to put a lot of trust in anything and everything that we hear or see. So because today visuals can be doctored, you and I know that. Mm-hmm. So this is what's happening, So too much of empowerment and wrongly utilizing that power that's given to netizens or anybody for that matter can be dangerous. So again, Otto, it's all about checking. Today we have to be very vigilant as gatekeepers We have to be very vigilant as news reporters. We need to know what is the truth and not the truth.
Correct.
So I think it's more like in search of the truth. And a story from Malaysia is not the only country that takes news from social media. This is happening everywhere. There's a lot of keyboard warriors. There's a lot of people who are working from home and giving this kind of information. And not all info is correct. So we really have to be discerning once again in using this kind of information.
So true. Totally agree. So what do you think about ethical journalism and netizens reporting? Should there be a fixed guideline for that particular, reporting?
It's a bit difficult to control netizens, right? Because they don't belong to any organization. Anyone and everyone can just sit and write. And today we live in a world where we like to have, how many people are watching your story or liking your story, or how many, people are tweeting back or retweeting. So everything seems to revolve around likes and popularity. So that's dangerous with this netizens stories, right? But what's also important is for journalists themselves to know that there's such a thing as ethics. Journalists can be controlled with ethics because they belong to an organization, and organizational ethics and guidelines become their benchmark. They need to follow that. But on the other hand, there's nothing that controls people who are just writing on social media. Of course, nowadays we can, even Facebook can actually take down wrongful posts. There's a lot of vigilance in that area. So they're careful about, defamation or people putting in wrong stories. So there's a bit of control, but you can't stop people from doing that because, everyone has a fake account, and anyone and everyone who writes this kind of stories may not be operating as a legitimate person. So we have to be careful when we take news from such individuals. It may look sensational, but it's to serve their own personal agenda.
So true. I totally agree with that as well. It takes a lot of responsibility and ethics to actually post something which is, not only accurate, but also from a correct source. And if you're tuning in right now, we are talking to Philomena Gnanapragasam. She's the director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development. We're talking about ethical journalism. We are also currently live on our Facebook Live right now at TRAXXfm Official, TRAXXfm OFFICIAL. Now, recently we had the Press Freedom Day at, I think, 3rd May it was, and talking about as well as safety of journalists. I mean, Philomena, what is your perception towards this, the press freedom as well as the safety of journalists?
Okay, press freedom, the media cannot be controlled. How can you be the upholder of democracy if you're overly controlled? I use the word overly because some amount of control is needed. Because, like for instance, I give you a simple example. If there's some kind of virus that's traveling around and, a journalist who actually gets all excited and, presents facts like, 1 million people have died or, something like that in a country, that can create chaos. So how much of truth, and is that truth going to impact people? Is it going to cause a national panic? Is it going to do something that's dangerous? And these are things that journalists have to weigh at the end of the day. And how much information, and is it necessary to give that information that probably can break up the political, or rather the unity of a nation? So there are many, many things to think about when you go into journalism. And at the core of all this is the interest it presents to the people of a particular country or a society. So I think this is important. You always have to think about, Otto, you used the word responsibility. So I would say responsible journalism, because there's so many things to think about. When you are reporting the truth about a child who's being abused, the story is sensational, but what about the child? What impact does it have on the kid? What is the emotional trauma that the child has when he or she listens to it? So these are things that we need to think when we say truth. So not everything needs to be highlighted and amplified. The truth, but is it the truth that's going to help change something or create a better tomorrow? Or, it's a truth that works. So these are some things that we need to look at responsibly when we release stories. So I think, freedom, people mistakenly take that freedom means just writing anything and everything, which is, to me, not responsible journalism.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another thing is when it comes to journalist safety, so we are not playing around. When it comes to safety, journalists are also actually at the forefront of any action for that matter. And recently we have seen a lot of cases whereby lives were at stake when it comes to journalists. What is your opinion on that when it comes to safety of journalists?
Very rightly said, Otto. That's the number one key thing. If you look at anything, whether it's a disease or a war or any kind of natural disaster, the journalists are the first people to be at the forefront. And I remember my son telling me, oh my God, this group of people are the most vulnerable, most exposed, right? And so I would say that it's so important for journalists to know that they have rights and that they need to be safe when they are going to cover a story. For instance, we have a Malaysian journalist. He's a news photographer. He was shot dead in one of the countries when he went to cover the news in the Middle East, right? And he was not prepared. He was not trained. So there's lots of cases. And now Malaysia is taking a greater stand, looking at it after that incident. But we are not the only people with this issue. Journalists all over Asia Pacific face this. They're not trained. So this is what the AIBD is doing. We're training journalists with UNESCO on safety of how to carry yourself, let's say, in a war journalism or during the pandemic. Journalists were rushing in, to hospitals, to everywhere, without realizing that they were fighting a virus. Mm-hmm. And nobody knew that they had to wear masks. And this was everywhere. I saw this in a clip from Wuhan, China. Journalists were coming out from Wuhan in the airport, and they were like, there was no social distancing, nothing. So later on, I asked, hey, how come these guys are together? Won't they catch the virus too? But people don't think about that because in search of the stories, you tend to be, you're so excited, you forget about the virus or you forgot about the gas leak and how you need to be wearing proper masks and so forth so that you don't get contaminated by that chemical or gas leak or something. So journalists, because they go in search of the story, they often forget the safety hazards, the hazards that come together with the job, and they become vulnerable. They're not able to face the issue that comes together with it. So also, I just want to say that at AIBD, we train journalists and anyone and everyone who works on the forefront. So we've done some, real life situation where, we reenacted a shooting or some kind of, a riot or crisis, and how journalists can actually, so we have trainers from the UK, Australia, and even some Malaysian trainers in safety have come forward to work with us. And we conducted this training, a few trainings, and this has really been good. So some of RTM news people were also trained in safety for journalists. So I would say that journalists, while you're in search of the story, please do not leave caution to the wind.
Oh, yes.
You have to be very responsible for yourself.
Which is why most journalists have a specific job. When it comes to news reporting, when it comes to war, there's a specific journalist for that because he or she might be trained in that particular field. When it comes to crime, there's a specific journalist for that. And AIBD is doing that very same thing. Thank you so much, Philo, for doing what you're doing. Now, speaking of which, what is Mojo? Seeing that journalists nowadays are, being more mobile savvy, most people are doing Mojo. So what is your opinion on this?
It's good, actually, to a certain extent, because mobile journalism, that's what is Mojo all about, mobile journalism. Now, especially this has been good during the pandemic. People were in a lockdown situation. So we talk, in fact, Otto, you're sitting in the first and foremost remote broadcasting, tool ever, that's radio. So I'm sure that as a radio broadcaster, as a presenter, you were able to do a huge number of stories just from your home or from your studio without, like you're interviewing me right now on the phone. So radio makes this possible. And mobile journalism, affords people, like for instance, in the case of countries like Bhutan, where people could not go to the remote areas to take pictures, we had journalists who used their phones to do the coverage of whatever was happening, and then they send it back to the head office. They send it back to the main news center. And so mobile journalism allows communities to report their news, and then these news can be, what's happening at a grassroots level, what's happening elsewhere. It enables the news organization to present this news. So I think mobile journalism is good, but again, like I said, check the facts, check the visuals, check the source. It's all about the source. Where is it coming from? Are they responsible for what they are saying or what they are sending? So these are things that gatekeepers of organizations need to check. It's always good to have multiple sources of information, especially when you're in newsroom.
Thank you so much for your opinion. Yeah. We are celebrating the National Journalist Day 2022 on the 29th of May in Malacca, and it will be officiated by the Prime Minister himself, Dato' Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob. What is your hope for the future of journalism in this country?
Thank you, Otto. I think the fact that the Prime Minister himself is, opening this particular Journalist Day shows that there is a lot of, interest and a lot of hope put into journalists. And I think it's so important for journalists of Malaysia to be knowing that journalism is something where you are encouraged to go in search of a story. I would encourage journalists to be more well-read. Even though you can just Google or something and find your information, I would say still please go and look for the source. Interview more than 2 or 3 people before you come out with a story. And do not copy. There's this thing that when everyone goes for a press conference, they write what the other newspapers are writing.
Yeah.
But, it's like, come give me the press release, I'll just write. So I would say that journalists need to take a more proactive role. And don't forget, the pen is mightier than the sword. Yes. Even though you're using a laptop to type what you're typing, but the finger that you're using represents the pen is mightier than the sword. Exactly. So there's a whole lot of good, positive journalism that one should focus on. Positive journalism, real stories that need to be highlighted, instead of only focusing on sensational issues or gossip or scandals. I mean, those news sell, but I think it's time for us to get on responsible journalism. That's very important.
Thank you so much, Philo. Any last messages to our listeners out there, or those potential to become, are actually studying journalism? What is your message towards them?
Message is, Otto, to say that always aim for the best and the most accurate information. Aim to be different and not sensational. Sensationalism dies, but if you go for a real good story, stories that are also positive, stories that help to build a society, a people, I think that's what journalism needs right now. And it's up to journalists themselves, to look at how journalism can stay for a very long time. Depends on how well you present that story, how well you look and try to come up with something that can be interesting. So go in search of that story, be ethical, and try to always do a fact-checking and be careful of disinformation. Now, that's my message. And Otto, I just want to say that even as I talk to you, we are having the Asia Media Summit going on live, where we're joined by more than 47 countries across the world. And I would suggest that all of you who are interested, please go to the AIBD website or My AIBD on Facebook. Please register and join us. We have lots of things happening. Future forward, reimagining media. And that's the theme of this year's Asia Media Summit, happening virtually.
Spectacular. Okay, thank you so much, Philomena Gnanapragasam. You've been a super friend and as well as super boss last time as well. Thank you so much. With that, we'd like to say thank you so much. And that's it from us here at the studio. I will not take you anymore, but then again, let's keep in touch, yeah?
Thank you, Otto. You're a fantastic interviewer. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, keep up the good work. Bye.
Oh, there you have it, coming to you live from AIBD. She is the Director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, Philomena Gnanapragasam, and we were talking about the ethical journalism. So thank you so much for those who are joining us from our Facebook Live at TRAXXfm Official. It's been a pleasure. Just want to say a quick hello to Boniface Philip. Thank you so much for saying good morning, and for those who actually shared this Facebook Live. We're going to take a break right now and also straight to the news at the top of the hour, and we will be back with more interesting stories lined up. For now, this is TRAXXfm. Good morning, Malaysia.
For your latest information, get expert opinion on an issue affecting us as Malaysians and citizens of the world. When we go face to face with our guests on Thursdays at 11:15 a.m. Only on TRAXXfm.